With new defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, we don't know exactly what this Packers defense is going to look like, but the draft might have given us a key hint. They look like they're going to be bringing the heat in 2024.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. There is a through line in the Packers draft, at least on defense. And Brian Gutekunst mentioned it a little bit in the post-draft presser about wanting guys who can run and hit. But it's not just about running and hitting. It is, and what stands out to me is running and hitting in specific ways, coming downhill. Evan Williams had one of the best pressure to sack rates in college football. They used him as a blitzer. Keaton Oladapo they both have sacks on Caleb Williams in their highlight packages. They are guys who come top down and whose teams use them as blitzers. When you look at a pick that, I am on record not being not understanding. I don't want to say not in support of, because that would be uncharitable. I didn't understand the Tyron Hopper pick. But since 2022, he's third among SEC linebackers in pressures. He is someone who can affect the quarterback. And Edgerrin Cooper, that is part of the pure base appeal of Edgerrin Cooper. 8 sacks last year, led the SEC in tackles for loss. His ability to affect the quarterback is primo. And so when we look back at what the Packers were doing at the end of last year, some of the things that they were really thriving with, some of these 5-man pressures, using Quay Walker or a safety or whatever it was, just to try and create more one-on-ones. That's already something that Edgerrin Cooper has shown he is terrific at. It was a hypothetical with Quay Walker. Hey, he's got the athletic tools and the length to be able to affect the quarterback in this way, so let's try it. We have proof of concept with Edgerrin Cooper. We know what that looks like. He is outstanding at it. It's the reason he was the first linebacker off the board, and he was asked about what separated him, and he said, I affect the quarterback. I can spy the quarterback. With all of these athletic quarterbacks that we have now in the NFL, you have to be able to chase down Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And then you add in this draft class. Caleb Williams is a good athlete. Drake May, Jaden Daniels. These are really, really good athletes. You have to be able to chase down quarterbacks, and you have to be able to affect the quarterback. One of the things that Jeff Hafley did at Boston College, because he needed to, he didn't have the elite talent, was he cooked up exotic pressures, especially on third down and especially in the red zone. And so in have to have it moments, he has that in his bag. And I think that is going to be part of the bread and butter for the Green Bay Packers, which is going to be music to the ears of a lot of fans who have been going, hey, it would be really nice to have a defense that dictated terms to opposing offenses. So while I thought that some of these picks did not maximize the value that the Packers had in terms of their draft selections. And we'll put a cap on that later in the show, and then not talk about it really again, because it's not relevant anymore. But they fit a mold. They fit a mold. And I like having a plan going in and say, these are the types of players who fit the attitude, who fit the perspective that the Packers are trying to have defensively. There's an interchangeability, guys who can play a little bit of everywhere. Keaton Oladapo, terrific run defending safety. Evan Williams, he can play overhang, lurk. He's a different type of player, but there's some versatility there. And then, of course, Javon Bullard has played here, there, and everywhere. We're going to talk about Bullard because he's an interesting player in the respect of, where is he going to play? What is the best position for him? And where is he going to start? Is it going to be at safety? Is it going to be at the nickel? Are they going to be as interchangeable as Brian Gutekunst wants them to be? We'll see. But he's also someone who, from the nickel, he can come down and make plays on the quarterback. Blitz off the slot. And that is just not the mindset that the Joe Barry defense had. Now, Mike Pettin, especially early on, he can put together a designer blitz. Now, it put some of his linebackers and safeties in bad positions because those guys were not always the most fundamentally sound. They didn't always have the best eyes. They were not always reading and reacting in ways that really worked for what they were trying to do. And the same was true for Dom Capers. I mean, he was a fire zone pioneer. But it got to the point where they just didn't have the defensive backs to handle some of the blitzes. And so we're going to see from the Packers, third down. And this is a 49ers thing. It's a Jets thing, although the Jets blitzed more last year, played more man coverage last year. We don't know what this outlay is going to look like in terms of how often are they going to play man. We know that they want to be a vision-based system. That means zone coverage. But Hafley played a ton of man coverage and press man at Ohio State, at Boston College. Is he coming to the NFL going, I know we can't do this? Or is he coming to the NFL going, this is something we have to do selectively? Or even if we play zone, we have to be able to press these guys. We have to be able to jam and be physical at the line of scrimmage, reroute. How much are these pressure packages going to be part of bread and butter? And how much is it going to be a third down and situation specific thing? Are there run blitzes that are going to be part of the mantra here? How crazy is he going to want to get? And how much adjustment is he going to have to make? Yes, he was a longtime NFL assistant coach, but he's never been an NFL DC, and he's not been in the NFL in half a decade. The game changes so rapidly, and I know he stays in touch with with Shanahan and Saleh and those guys, but that's not the same as preparing week in and week out to do those things. And so that raises our antenna even higher to go, what is this going to look like exactly? And I think that's the tricky part of this. There is a signal here from this draft class, it seems, that they want guys who want to come downhill with force, who want to play aggressively, and who can affect the quarterback, even as safeties, even as defensive backs. Guys who can affect the QB, because everyone in some way or another on defense has to be able to affect the QB, whether it is covering someone, whether it is physically affecting the QB, whether it is depositing blockers in the lap of the quarterback or just eating up blocks. If you have to eat up two on a regular basis, you're freeing up guys elsewhere to get one-on-ones, and they can go affect the quarterback. And you are in some way or another affecting the quarterback. It's the most important thing a defensive player can do. I can't wait to see them on the field for the first time, because it does seem like we're going to get a team that is going to be not just more aggressive in the way that they pressure, but more exotic, more creative, and more judicious about it. You don't have to be Rex Ryan or Todd Bowles and just say, damn the torpedoes every single snap. No, they have got Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Preston Smith, Kingsley Enagbare, who it sounds like is going to be healthy now. They have guys who can get home. Kenny Clark, Colby Wooden, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks. They don't need to just blitz your face off. but they can. And I think getting players, we talked about before the season, the Jim Schwartz effect, the mindset change. It is so crucial. You don't have to change that many players when the coach comes in and sets different rules of engagement. That can have an enormous effect on the way these teams play. So let's try and set some reasonable expectations for these rookies. We'll do that next on Locked On Packers. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in the game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day. With constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I know everyone wants to induct these players into the Hall of Fame. No, that's a Bears fan thing to do. But it's easy to get excited about, especially the guys at the top. And I think interestingly, and this is often the case with Packers drafts, it seems, I don't know what to do with Jordan Morgan. If he's going to begin his journey with the Packers at left tackle, I kind of don't see him winning that job over Rasheed Walker. Now, the Packers, they can put their thumbs on the scales in these cases, and for the long-term development of the team, maybe it's best that he do that. But you also have to balance that with the fact that the Packers are competing in the NFC right now this year. And so, do you want to move him to guard or cross-train him at guard? If you do that, are you cross-training him at left guard? Or are you cross-training him at right guard, in which case he's got to learn a whole new stance, a whole new everything? And then are you then going to play him at right tackle if you want to move Zach Tom? So the Jordan Morgan thing is tricky. He plays a premium position, it sounds like. They're going to play tackle. So from that standpoint, we know at least where the starting point is. But that doesn't mean he is going to start. It's going to be really hard to keep Edgerrin Cooper out of the starting lineup. There are not two better linebackers on this team. I know Isaiah McDuffie is familiar with Jeff Hafley. I know Quay Walker is also a former first-round pick. But neither of them are more talented than Edgerrin Cooper. I went back and watched more of Edgerrin Cooper last night, and the Alabama game in particular. There are like jump out of your seat plays that he makes. I joked on social media that there are times when his closing speed, and this is a huge thing for pass rushers and linebackers. Closing burst to the ball carrier. It's good. It's big. In cornerback play or safety play, it's usually makeup speed. If you get beat, how fast can you close down space? But with linebackers and defensive linemen, you need to be able to close down space to the ball carrier. So once you line up your target, how fast can you just go A to B? And Edgerrin Cooper is, I truly believe, I know he didn't run the fastest 40 time in the NFL. He plays in the SEC. These are the best athletes in college football. And he made these guys look slow at times in the open field. When he has a chance to see it, fire his guns and go, he looks like he comes to the NFL and is immediately one of the 5 fastest linebackers in the league coming downhill. Seriously. And I think there are some similarities when you look at some of these other solid defenses. He doesn't have the movement and coverage skills of Fred Warner, though Fred Warner didn't coming out of college either. That was something that I think was developed over time. It's much more like someone like Quincy Williams in New York. A little undersized, but explosive coming downhill. I just feel like he is going to start. If he is healthy in training camp, and this is a huge problem with rookies, you miss time and you are so far behind. You use the 45th pick on a guy, you expect him to come in and at least compete to start. I would be surprised if he does not start 13 or 14 games at least for this team, assuming he's healthy. Maybe he doesn't win the job week 1, but like by week 3, week 4, he's one of the starters. Javon Bullard is tougher to peg because we don't know where he's going to play. Brian Gutekunst had a weird thing on Sunday after the draft. He said the 2 safeties we drafted. And I went, does that mean Javon Bullard is not a safety? Does that mean he was talking about just the 2 safeties they drafted on day 3? What exactly did he mean by that? I'm trying to figure out where all the pieces fit. And to me, the most likely scenario is Xavier McKinney and Javon Bullard are the interchangeable pieces Brian Gutekunst told us that he wanted. And because he told us everything else he was going to do in this draft, I feel like I have to take that at face value. He said he was going to draft a quarterback. They did. He said they wanted interchangeable safeties. He got a guy who literally has played nickel and safety in his career. So, like, I believe him. So I think Bullard is going to be a safety. But then the question is, okay, is their base look going to be nickel? Is it going to be Keyshawn Nixon nickel? I'm trying to think of a pun there, but it's tough. It's going to be a little contrived. Or is it going to be big nickel? Oh. Be cool. Oh no. Is it going to be big nickel, which is what I definitely said the first time? Big nickel with Keaton Oladapo or Evan Williams, where you have Bullard who can be that slot player if they, flex out a tight end or something like that. Like, are you going to match 11 personnel with big nickel, or are you going to match them with nickel? If they're in base, are you going to play base, or are you going to play big nickel? I think that seems to me to be most likely. So you play the 49ers and they come out with, 21, and you come out with big nickel instead of true base. Someone like Evan Williams is playing linebacker for you, that overhang kind of slot defender, and it's not Javon Bullard. I can see that, or I can see Bullard just being the nickel from day one. Now they're paying Keyshawn Nixon like he's going to be the nickel, but I don't know. Bullard just seems like the more natural fit there to me. Seems like the better cover player to me, but we're talking about projection, albeit from the SEC. But look, if it were easy to project, it would be much more efficient in the NFL to draft these guys, and it's not. After that, I think we're talking about dart throws. MarShawn Lloyd with AJ Dillon and Josh Jacobs, I think we're talking about scheme touches, 4-6 touches a game. Whether it's jet sweeps, whether it's screen game, whether it's pony personnel. I don't think he's going to play a ton, but I think he could be really fun when he's out there. I think I would give him a shot on kick return with Keyshawn Nixon because of his ability to make you miss. I'm really excited about that. And then where does Kalen King fall in all of this? Could he figure into the nickel job? Could he figure in at safety? There was some speculation that he plays safety. I think he can play zone. be a zone corner for this team. I would like that. Of the two safeties, I know Evan Williams get drafted first, but I like Keaton Oladapo better overall. But it's just those guys, it's so hard to know late on day 3. Like, are you relying on any of them to come in and give you reps? What is translatable? What isn't? It's tough. It's tough. And I don't expect those day 3 offensive linemen to figure in meaningfully to what's going to happen on this team this year. It's too much to put on those guys for a team that has other options and expects to win the Super Bowl. I just think that doesn't work. And speaking of those guys, we're going to talk about them in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So, look, the Bucks are underdogs against the Pacers. Likely no Giannis, likely no Dame. Can't risk it. Can Chris Middleton lead them back into this series? If they get a win, all of a sudden, like, you get Giannis back or you get Dame back. Who knows? Who knows? Could be interesting. Could be a chance to make some money. And when you have the bonus bet guaranteed, you're not really risking anything. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. All on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. I wanted to put a bow on our conversation about reaches. And if you go back the last 3 drafts, the biggest reach the Packers had was Sean Clifford, based on consensus. The 2 other biggest were in this draft, Jacob Monk and Evan Williams. And then Tariq Carpenter, and then Jonathan Ford, and then 2 more players from this draft class. So that just gives you an understanding and an idea of how far afield this class in particular. If it's 1 or 2 guys, it's fine. But look at the list, and Zach Cruz put together this list. The biggest reaches in terms of the consensus board since 2022. It's Sean Clifford, backup. Tariq Carpenter, is he in the NFL? Jonathan Ford, like borderline rosterable player. Anders Carlson, okay. Jaden Reed, good player. Samori Toure, borderline NFL player. Quay Walker is probably not going to get a second contract with the Packers as of this moment. Lou Nichols. Now, a lot of those players are day 3 guys. Sean Clifford, Tariq Carpenter, Jonathan Ford, Anders Carlson, Samori Toure, Lou Nichols. Those are 5, 6, 7 round guys. So what happens is the higher the stakes, the higher the draft pick, the more consequential the reach because of what the opportunity cost is. You draft this player at the risk of not drafting another player. And so going far afield, you're increasing your risk and you're increasing your opportunity cost. That's not to say don't draft these players. Though I believe in what history tells us that the further you get from consensus, the more likely you are to miss. That doesn't mean your scouting, you should just fire all your scouts and just draft off the consensus board. That seems kind of like, but that's what Philadelphia does. It seems kind of like that's what Cincinnati does. Those teams are really good, but they're really good for other reasons because they made some big bets at quarterback. The Bengals were bad enough to get Joe Burrow and got lucky that they were in a draft where you're getting Joe Burrow and not, a different number 1 over Baker Mayfield, for example. Although the Browns could have taken Josh Allen in that draft. They could have taken Lamar Jackson in that draft. They chose not to. They chose to take Baker Mayfield But they also could have taken Sam Darnold just as easily. So it is true that those day 3 reaches, so like the Jacob Monks, like that's not the end of the world. But 3rd and 4th round picks, 5th round picks, those are real picks. The Tyron Hopper, quote unquote reach, almost 2 full rounds of value. Certainly qualifies. A top 100 pick in a draft class where we think it's particularly shallow. That's just tough. From a process standpoint, it's not maximally getting your odds where they need to be. You're not giving yourself the best chance to succeed. And so, again, I'm not saying don't draft those guys, but you need to be sure that the consensus piece of this, it is one last check. So if you think this player is way better than everyone else, history tells us you're probably the wrong one, not everybody else. But that's not to say that there aren't exceptions to that rule and that you shouldn't, Josh Sitton. We can think of exceptions, but the exceptions prove the rule. The Packers had a draft, in this case, full of them. And that's where this gets problematic. 1 or 2 or even 3 on, if they're all on day 3, okay, fine. You're getting the difference between a 4th round pick and a 7th round pick, especially in this draft, so much eye of the beholder because it was a shallow draft with COVID. Because of the underclassmen and all that stuff. It was just so more shallow than we think it's going to be moving forward in some way. And so the difference between a 4th round pick and a 7th round pick, smaller than in most draft classes. That being said, there were plenty of players on the board at 91 that weren't 150 on the consensus board. And so you're giving up the chance to draft one of those players for a player who could be good. I'm not burying these kids. It's not their fault that the Packers picked them where they did. The players can still be good. But from a process standpoint, it's just not good asset management. Now that the assets are players and people, I understand that this gets fraught. It's tricky to have a conversation about. Because I want Tyron Hopper to be a good player. I want Evan Williams to be a good player. I want them to, all these guys in the NFL, I want everyone to be good. Except Justin Fields. I just have too much riding on it. Well, he can be good in Pittsburgh. That's fine. He needed to not be good in Chicago, just for the vibes. But I want all these players to come into the NFL and succeed. It's just that we have to be honest about the process here. And so now, okay, the process conversation's been had. Now we get to talk about the players. Are they doing what they need to do? Can they help the team? How can they help the team? We'll see them in rookie camp and we'll be off and running. So no more conversations about draft process, except when I have to come back and complain about it at some point in the future, like I've had to do with Quay Walker over and over. People are mad at me that I don't think Quay Walker is very good, but I'm sorry, I have 2 eyes. I watched the games. He's just not been a good football player. So I have to talk about the process of him being drafted because it is something that has affected the Packers. They could have had better players, and they don't. It's not as big a deal in the first round or in the 4th round than it is in the first round. Much bigger deal. So that's why I don't want to wail and gnash my teeth over this, because I really liked the top 4 picks on the board. After that, it got a little weird in the middle rounds, and then they brought it all back. And I think overall, they did a really good job of finding talent at the right spots in aggregate. But they got a little lucky to be able to do that. All right, back tomorrow, much more. We will start our rookie orientation series in earnest. Brandon Thorne from Trench Warfare is going to be on the show. Maddie Hudak she covers Tulane, is going to be on the show to talk about Michael Pratt. Our pal Bailey Burmaster, formerly on the Packers beat, now down in Atlanta, is going to come on and talk about Javon Bullard. We're already making moves here to get these people on the show, to bring you these players, to introduce you to them if you are unfamiliar with them. Joey from Underage Packers is going to come on and talk about Tyron Hopper and maybe convince you that you are too low, Peter, on Tyron Hopper. We'll see. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, we'll be live on YouTube in the offseason. If anything big happens, maybe just for fun a couple times, go follow us on the social medias, Locked On Packers, anywhere you find social medias, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts, so you can stay Locked On Packers.